The Island of the Fae by Edgar Allan Poe. Nullus enim lucusine genio est, Servius. La musique, says Marmontel, those Contes Maroques, which in all our translation we have insisted upon calling moral tales, as if in mockery of her spirit. La musique est le soil des talents du Joyce de l'homme, tois les autres willis de tumes. He here confounds the pleasure derivable from sweet sounds with the capacity for creating them. No more when any other talent, as what for music so skeptical or complete enjoyment, where is no second party to appreciate its exercise. And it is only in common with our talents that produce effects which may be fully enjoyed in solitude. The idea which a raconter has either failed to entertain certainly or sacrificed in its expression to his national love of point is, doubtless, the very tame one, but the higher order of music is the most thoroughly estimated when we are exclusively alone. The proposal in this form will be admitted at once by those who love the lyre for its own sake and for its spiritual use. But there is one pleasure still within the reach of fallen mortality, and perhaps only one, which owes even more what does music to the accessory sentiment of seclusion. I mean, the happiness experienced in the contemplation of natural scenery. In truth, man who would behold all right the glory of God upon earth must in solitude behold that glory. To me, at least, the presence, not of human life only, but of life in any other form, when rid of the green things which go upon the soils and are voiceless, as a stain upon the landscape, is at war with the genius of the sea. I love indeed to regret the dark valleys and the grave rocks, and the waters which silently smile and forest with sight and uneasy slumbers, and the proud watchful mountains that look down upon all. I love to regard these as themselves, but the colossal members at one vast animate and sentient whole, a whole whose form, whatever sphere, is the most perfect and most inclusive of all, whose path is among associate planets, whose meek handmaiden is the moon, whose mediate servant is the sun, whose life is eternity, whose thought is that of a god, whose enjoyment is knowledge, whose destinies are lost in immensity, whose cognizance of ourself is akin with our own cognization and the animalculae which infest the brain, a being which we, in consequence, regard as poorly animated, and material much in the same manner as with amylocate must regard us. Our telescopes and our mathematical investigations assures us on every hand, notwithstanding the cant of a more ignorant of the priesthood, that space, and therefore that bulk, is an important consideration in the eyes of the Almighty. The cycles in which the stars move are those best adapted for the evolution without collision and the greatest possible numbers of bodies. The form of those bodies accurately such as, within a given surface, to include the greatest possible amount of matter, and the surface themselves are so disposed as to accommodate a denser population than could be accommodated on the same surface otherwise arranged. Nor is it any argument against bulk being an object of God, but space itself is infinite, for where may be an infinite of matter to fill it? And since we see clearly that the involvement of matter vitally is a principle, indeed, as far as our judgment extends, the living principle in the operation of deity, it is secondly logical to imagine it confined to the regions of a minute, where we daily trace it, and not extending to those of the August. As we find cycle within cycle without end, yet are we rolling around one of our distant centre, which is the Godhead. May we not analogize, suppose in the same manner, life within life, unless within the greater, and all within the Spirit divine. In short, we are madly erring through self-esteem in believing man in either as terror of future destinies to be of more moment in the universe when that vast cloud of a valley which he tilts and contents, and to which he denies a self for no more profound reason, but when he does not behold in it in operation. These fancies, and such as these, have always given to me meditation among the mountains and the forest, the rivers and the ocean, a tangle of what the everyday world would not fail to term fantastic. My wanderings Amid such scenes have been many and far-searching and often solitary, and the interest with which I have strayed through many a dim, deep valley or gazed into the reflection heaven of many a bright lake has been an interesting greatly dependent by the thought when I have strayed and gazed alone. The flippant Frenchman was it who said in allusion to the well-known work of Zimmerman that solitude est une belle choice. Moi il faut que nous propose dire que la solitude est une belle choice. The criminal cannot be against it, but the necessity is a thing that does not exist. It was during one of my lonely journeys amid a far-distant region of mountain, locked within mountains and sad rivers, a melancholy tarn riding and sleeping within all, that I chanced upon a certain rivet in Ireland. I came upon them suddenly in the leaf June, and threw myself upon the turf, beneath the branches of an unorthodox shrub, that I might dance and I contemplate the scene. I felt it thus only should I look upon it, such was the character of phantasm which it wore. On all sides, save to the west, where the sun was about sinking, arose the verdant walls of a frost. The river, which turned sharply in its course and was thus immediately lost to sight, seemed to have no exit from its prison, but to be absorbed by the dead green foliage of the trees to the east, while in the opposite quarter, so it appeared to me as I lay at length and glanced upward, there poured down noiselessly and continuously into the valley a rich golden and crimson waterfall from the sunset fountain of the sky. Above midway, in the short vista which my dreamy vision took in, one small circular island, profusely verdant, reposed upon the bosom of a stream, so blended bank and shadow air, but each seemed pendulous in air, so mirror-like was the glassy water, it was exactly possible to say, and would point upon the slope of the emerald turf its crystal dominion began. My position enabled me to include in a single view both the eastern and western extremities of the islet, and observed a singularly marked difference in the aspects. The latter was all one radiant harem of garden beauties. It glowed and blushed beneath the eyes of the sunlight and fairly laughed with flowers. The grass was short, spring, sweet, scant, and deposited industry. The trees were light, mirthful, erect, bright, slender, and graceful, of eastern figure and foliage, with bark smooth, glossy, and party-colored. There seemed a deep sense of life and joy about all, and all of no air blew from out the heavens, yet everything had motion, for the gentle sweeping to and fro of innumerable butterflies that might have been mistaken for tulips with wings. The other eastern end of the isle was whelmed in blackless shade, a sombre yet beautiful and peaceful gloom here pervaded all things. The trees were dark in color, and mournful in form and attitude, wrapping themselves into sad, solemn, and spectral shapes that conveyed ideas of mortal sorrow and untimely death. The grass wore with depth tined of cypress, and the heats of its blades hung droppingly and higher and finer among it were many small unsightly hillocks, long and narrow, and not very long, but have the aspect of gravy, but were not, although over and all about them the rue and rosemary clambered. The shade of a tree fell heavily upon the water, and seemed to bury itself therein, impregnating the depths of the elements with darkness. I fancied that each shadow, as the sun descended lower and lower, separated itself suddenly from the trunk that gave it birth, and was became absorbed by the stream, while our shadows issued momently from the trees, taking the place of their predecessors, thus entombed. This idea, having once seized upon my fancy, greatly excited it, and I lost myself forthwith in grief. If every island were enchanted, said I to myself, this is it. This is the haunt of a few gentle face, those who remain from the wreck of the race, or whose green tombs were, or do we yield up their sweet lives as mankind yield up their own, and dying to wane or rather waste away mournfully, rendering unto God little by little existence as these trees went up shadow after shadow, exhausted the substance unto dissolution. What a racing tree is the water that implants its shade, long was blacker by what it preys upon, may not the life of Fate be to the death that engulfs it? As I was mused with half-shut eyes, while the sun It sank rapidly to rest, and heading currents carried round and round the island, bearing upon their bosom large, dazzling white flakes of the bark of the skymore flakes, which, in their multiform position upon the water, a quick imagination might have converted into anything it pleased. While I thus mused, it appeared to me the form of one of those very faces about whom I had been pondering made its way slowly into the darkness, from out the light of the western end of the island. She stood erect in a singularly fragile canoe, and urged it with a mere phantom of an oar, while within the influence of the luminous sunbeams, her attitude seemed indicative of joy, but so deformed it as she passed within the shade. Slowly she glided along the length round the island, and re-entered the ring of light. The revolution which has just been made by the Fae, continued I musingly, is the cycle of a brief year of her life. She has floated through her winter and through her summer. She is a year near unto death, for I did not fail to see it. She came into a shape, a shadow fell from her, and was shrouded up in the dark water, making its blackness more black. And again, the boat appeared in the Fae, but about the attitude of the later wearer was more of care and uncertainty and less of elastic joy. She floated again from out the light into the gloom which deepened momently, and again her shadow fell from her into the ebony water and became absorbed into its blackness. And again she made the circuit of the island, and the sun rushed down to his slumbers, and at each issuing into the light there was more sorrow about her person, where it grew fairer and far fainter and more indistinctly, and at each passage into the gloom there fell from her a darker shade, which became whelmed in a shadow more black. But at length when the sun had utterly departed, the Fae, now the mere ghost of her former self, went disconsolated with the boat into a region of even afloat, in which it issued whence it all, I cannot say, for darkness fell over any things, and I beheld a magical figure no more.